It's your boy Luke, back again for another NFL DFS video, this time for our Week 7 core plays, where we're going to go position by position for the main slate on Sunday and talk about our favorite plays and a variety of different salary ranges, some popular plays, some people that are being a little bit overlooked, going to give you a little bit of everything. Real quickly before we hop into the picks, I want to remind you that we don't just have our core picks here on the channel. We also have our value picks video, which will be dropping tomorrow, as well as our fades and sleepers on Saturday, and of course our weekly DFS live stream. That is always going to be Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, covering any last second injuries, our player pool, we'll go through our projections, we'll make some lineups, and of course bring any questions that you have, whether that's for season long fantasy, whether that's for the DFS main slate. I'll get you covered. But without further delay, let's hop right into the picks here for Week 7. And now for our quarterbacks here in Week 7. For our first target, we have Derrick of the Las Vegas Raiders, and somebody who's had a very good start to this year. I think it's been a little bit sneaky as well. He's not really in the conversation for MVP, even Offensive Player of the Year, but as of right now is top 5 in yardage, touchdowns, and yardage per snap. So he's been very efficient. He's also been in a relatively high volume offense as well over there in Las Vegas. And of course, a lot has been made of the whole Gruden saga and the change of coach, the change of scheme, everything like that. But Carr last week showed out and looked like himself, right? Somebody who is obviously one of the more intelligent quarterbacks in the NFL, has been compared to Tom Brady for his prowess at calling audibles and that kind of thing. So with a soft defense on the Eagles side of things, trying to cover him, I definitely do like this matchup. You can see how I've been projected for 22.9 points, and at $6,000, that would be more than enough production to pay that off. So really like him there. That's why he's our first target I'll talk about this week. For our next guy, it's going to be Davis Mills, and that might be a little bit surprising, but he has a very nice price tag there at $4,900. Also a matchup that I think is a little bit sneaky. You got this Arizona Cardinals defense, which has been right about average at this point of the year. They've had a few good games against some quarterbacks, but have also gotten exposed at times. And I do expect the Cardinals to win here, to be extremely efficient on the offensive side of things. Hell, Kyler Murray was even somebody I considered playing in this core plays video, but just didn't make the top 6. Davis Mills, on the other hand, going to get plenty of production, whether that's in a competitive game or in garbage time. In my opinion, we're definitely going to see it in garbage time. The Cardinals are big favorites here, and I see them winning by at least 2 touchdowns. But in that type of game scenario, Mills is going to be forced to throw and throw a lot. And we've seen in the past that he is able to be an efficient quarterback. We've seen him throw over 300 yards twice so far this year. So while he isn't going to be somebody that pops in your modeling or anything like that, at $4,900, I think he could do a whole lot worse in terms of a punt play. So he projected for 20 points right there. And if he gets to that mark, could end up being optimal in a milli maker type sense. And number 4, we have Aaron Rodgers at $7,500. So we're starting to get to some of the more expensive options on the slate. And I really do like this game flow scenario between the Packers and the Washington football team. Obviously, 2 are higher scoring teams, 2 teams that like to air it out. And on the Washington side of things, you have a defense that is atrocious against wide receivers, atrocious against opposing quarterbacks. So for Aaron Rodgers, again, a little bit more expensive, but you can match him up with somebody like Devontae Adams. You can match him up with an Aaron Jones, even a Robert Tonyan, who's all the way down at $3,500. All of which we will talk about here in this video. So really do like the matchup. The only reason he's not higher on this list is the price tag. He's $7,500. One of the more expensive options on the slate, but with the type of game flow that we expect, somebody I still will have in plenty of my lineups. And number 3, we have Lamar Jackson, who is a regular on the show. You guys know I'm in love with his rushing upside. So at $7,400 against a relatively hard matchup with this Bengals defense, I'm still more than willing to go there. I have him projected right now for 25.8 points, and we do expect plenty of scoring in this game. Joe Burrow has been efficient at this point of the year, has led the Bengals to a much better record than most have expected. And of course, this Ravens offense has Lamar Jackson as a borderline MVP candidate. So I expect absolute fireworks. I like stacking this game. You can use a Joe Burrow stack. You can go with a Lamar Jackson stack, obviously. Relatively cheap options to use on each side and to use as buybacks. So my preferred option in this game, definitely going to be Lamar Jackson, but overall, definitely like that whole game script in general. And number 2, we have Matthew Stafford heading back to Detroit, playing against his old team, and at $7,100, this is a revenge spot I want a ton of. So not only do we have plenty of targets for Matthew Stafford to use as stacking options, obviously Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, people like Tyler Higbee. You also have a good price tag. He's only $7,100, so cheaper than people like Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers, and in a very similar type situation. I mean, Lions defense has been the worst defense in the NFL to this point against opposing passers, and obviously one of the higher over-under games here as well. So I like Matthew Stafford there at number 2 in a revenge spot against his former team. But our number 1 pick this week is also a regular of this channel and specifically of this video. Is going to be Patrick Mahomes. And pretty much anytime we have Mahomes on a slate, you're going to want to have exposure to him in terms of stacks. So $8,400. He is the second most expensive quarterback on this slate, just behind Kyler Murray, but I think that's more than warranted here. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans that the Chiefs will be squaring off against are a team that lets up a ton of passing yardage to opposing quarterbacks. And to this point, Patrick Mahomes, the number 1 fantasy player in general here in 2021. So I don't think you can go wrong with a very soft matchup, also a very productive offense on the Chiefs side of things. You also have some good stacking options. You can obviously use people like Tyreek Hill. You can go to a Travis Kelce. You have people like Mecole Hardman that are more of a middle tier option in terms of stacks. But more importantly, you have people that are really cheap that you can go to. You can go to Darrell Williams at running back. You can go to Josh Gordon at wide receiver if you're feeling a little bit frisky this week. But overall, at a 27.6 point projection, he's somebody who I just can't avoid, especially for stacks in my lineups. Now for our running backs for week 7. First off, we have Chuba Hubbard at $6,100 and a very good matchup against the Giants defense, which is a top 5 defense to play against for running backs. In terms of projected points, I have him at 18.2, and at $6,100, that's more than enough to pay off. This is one of the sneakier games to target on this slate, as it ranks as the 3rd highest over-under on the entire slate. Also, a Giants team in general that's just a little bit defeated. You have tons of injuries on that team, tons of players that are going to be playing banged up. So as a result, I do expect this Panthers team to take advantage to go out and pick up a win. And in a winning game script, Hubbard is a much better player in terms of his projection. He projects for an extra 7 or 8 rushes, also a few extra targets out of the backfield, and of course a lot more production. So Chuba Hubbard, somebody who's definitely priced up for the occasion. We knew that Christian McCaffrey was not going to be a factor with him being placed on the IR, but somebody who I'll have in plenty of lineups as one of my middle tier running back options. As promised, at number 5, we have Aaron Jones, somebody who I love matching up with Aaron Rodgers. $7,500, much like his quarterback on that team. Really like the matchup against the Washington football team. Don't even hate using them together, as I've mentioned before. He has plenty of PPR upside out of the backfield. We've seen games where he's gone out and conned 3 touchdowns. So Aaron Jones, somebody I like in this scenario, also projected for just over 20 fantasy points. At number 4, we have someone on the other side of things. He's a little bit banged up, so I think he's going to go a little bit under the radar. That being Antonio Gibson of the Washington football team. Also getting a little bit of a better price tag on him. They're at $5,900. He was up at the high $6,000 range, even $7,000 range at the beginning of the year. So nice to see a little bit of salary savings there. I'm projected right now for just under 18 fantasy points, and perhaps not somebody who's going to get a lot of PPR upside. Again, we do expect this Packers offense to have a lot of success here and to probably end up getting a lead. But if Washington has any chance of going out there and competing, it is on the heels of a huge game from Gibson. I mean, obviously, he's been one of the best rushers in the NFL, despite playing on one of the worst O-lines in the NFL. He's been very good in terms of a yards per rush type perspective, very good in the red zone. He's really good at finding pay dirt. So at number 4, I think you could do a whole lot worse, and at that type of price range. At number 3, we have Darrell Henderson Jr. at $6,600, and he's part of that revenge game for Stafford against this Lions team. So I like the projection there just because we expect them to whoop their butt. Obviously, the Lions, one of the worst teams in the NFL to this point, they do not have a win. So Darrell Henderson Jr., already somebody who's getting plenty of touches, usually in about that 18 to 22 touch range. Probably going to see 25 plus touches in this game. So projecting out very nicely. They're at 19.4 points and also at a relatively affordable price tag. He is in the top 5 in terms of DraftKings pricing for this week, but only $6,600, which is a little bit surprising. At number 2, we have Damian Harris. He's $5,700 and a very good matchup against the New York Jets. And I don't have to tell you that the Jets are an absolutely shit show of a team. a team that is not good on offense, obviously with the rookie quarterback, but is also letting up plenty of yardage on the defensive side of things. So Damian Harris, somebody who's seeing close to 20 touches in competitive games for the Patriots. And yes, even though they have Stevenson, a few other backs there that have been getting touches for the Patriots, there has been more than enough workload to go around. So Damian Harris, somebody who, kind of like Henderson, has been much better on a per snap basis than a lot of his peers. So at $5,700 with this great matchup and at an 18.7 point projection, that's why he cracks my top three. But at number one, we have King Henry, Derrick Henry of the Titans. Also somebody we probably didn't have to tell you to play, but we'll go through my 2 cents on him here real quickly. $9,200, which is an extremely high price tag, but in this high upside matchup against the Chiefs defense, I absolutely love going to him. You can see I have him projected for 25 fantasy points, which is by far the highest projection we've had for a running back here on the slate. But not only are the Chiefs a defense that lets up a lot of yardage, also a lot of points, particularly in garbage time if it gets to that point, they're also a team that's just bad against the run in general. When we've seen the Chiefs struggle this year, it's been because teams have been able to run the ball against them. And we know one thing about this Titans team is that they're going to run the ball, and they're going to run it an absolute shit ton. And even if they're behind, they won't deviate from that type of a game plan just because they know it'll work. So Henry there, $9,200. You know he's a relatively safe play on the slate. Obviously, there's a ton of opportunity cost with that $9,200 price tag, but as you guys have seen from our picks so far and what you'll see in our wide receivers and tight ends, there are plenty of value spots on this slate to make that hyper price tag happen. So definitely have them in plenty of my lineups this week, and think you should as well. Guys, I wanted to remind you about my NFL Patreon projections page. On there, you guys can get access to all of my projections for this week's games. So not just for Showdown, also for the main slate. I cover every position, every player, making sure you have all the data you guys need to make your fantasy lineups. It can be for season-long fantasy, it can be for Draftkings DFS. I cover it all. We cover the best matchups of the week, the best plays of the week. Of course, I go over some ownership projections, some game theory notes. We have the GS Luke Community Discord you become a part of whenever you join. That is, again, all for $1 a month. So the best value in the entire industry, just 25 cents for the week, about a cent per game in terms of NFL projections. So definitely more than worth it. Recommend you guys join. A link will be down in the description for you guys to do so. Now for our top wide receivers to target here in week 7. First off, we've got Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at $5,900. I don't necessarily love the matchup with the Chicago Bears team. Obviously, one of the worst teams in the NFL, a team that you love playing against if you're on the offensive side of things, but from a fantasy perspective, can be a little bit tricky just because there are plenty of blowouts when you play a team like the Bears or potentially a team like the Lions. And fantasy results can be a little bit tricky there. Like I said, you have some players that will obviously go off, will take advantage of the matchup, and you'll have plenty of players that end up being shut out just because of opportunity. You get way ahead, you run the ball a lot more, so if you're a wide receiver, maybe you don't get as many targets, or you're a running back and you get way ahead, so you go to the backup running back. You only end up seeing a few rushes, so it can be a little bit tricky, but in this situation, Chris Godwin's just vastly underpriced. He's only $5,900 and is somebody I see as the number 2/number 3 wide receiver on this team. I think you have 3 wide receivers there in Tampa Bay that you could argue could be a number 1 on pretty much any team in the NFL. Obviously, you have Antonio Brown, you have Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans. So for me, you can essentially interchange all their prices and I'd be all right with it. So Chris Godwin is by far the cheapest of the bunch. We finally see Antonio Brown priced where he should be. Somebody I've been advocating for the entire year, and you now finally see him as the premier option on that team. And I completely agree with that. It's just that now I think Chris Godwin is a little bit underpriced. So at 17.2 points for my projection this week, somebody who's not jumping off the page. He's not, a 3 or a 4 times X value in terms of points per dollar, but somebody I'll definitely be going to as a sense of a little bit of a floor here. At number 5, we have Hunter Renfrow at $4,800. So somebody I like stacking with Derek Carr, who was one of the quarterbacks we talked about before. A soft matchup against this Eagles defense, and he's not going to have to deal with Darius Slay. Darius Slay is going to be working on the outside, so somebody like Hunter Renfrow going to be patrolling the middle of the field and not having to garner a really tough matchup. So if you're going to go to anybody on this team that's a wide receiver, I like going to Hunter Renfrow the most. Also really like going to Darren Waller for that same reason. Not going to have to worry about Darius Slay. So I am projected right there for 16.5 points, and again, somebody who's good with a Derek Carr stack. At number 4, we have Sterling Shepard, who is just the last man standing for this Giants team. They seemingly have everyone going down with injuries, and pretty severe injuries at that. So at $5,600, despite a tough matchup against this Carolina Panthers team, I do like him in this matchup at an 18.2 point projection. Again, they're dealing with plenty of guys being down here, so we're expecting a 35, maybe even 40% target share for Shepard, and this is one of the higher over-under games on the entire slate. So it's a relatively straightforward pick right here. Anybody that does statistical modeling, that is looking at over-unders, that is looking at target shares, is going to see Sterling Shepard absolutely pop this week. So definitely should be chalky, right? We should expect him to garner quite a bit of ownership just because he's in a good situation, but that's well warranted. It's a situation well worth taking advantage of, and I'll have plenty of them in my lineups this week. At number 3, though, we have a huge shift in price here, and these bottom 3 guys, I like them there in the middle tier. I think they're good filler options, but I'm going to have one of these next 3 options in every lineup that I run. They're slam dunk plays. I think 1, maybe even 2 of them this week go out for massive ceiling performances. So first and foremost, that's going to be Cooper Kupp there at $8,400. Obviously extremely bullish on Matthew Stafford in this revenge game against his former team. So Cooper Kupp has been the number 1 fantasy wide receiver to this point in the year. I am projected for 22.4 fantasy points. Also, just a solid floor projection. He's going to get plenty of targets. We've seen him get over 8 targets in every game this year. And also he's going to cash in with relatively good efficiency. So Cooper Kupp, I like his floor here. I also really like the ceiling as well. Again, I think Matthew Stafford is going to go out and try to prove something. Probably going to try and throw 3 or 4 touchdowns, 300 yards, that kind of thing, which leaves plenty of opportunity for Kupp. At number 2, we have Tyreek Hill, another guy with just immense upside. Anytime we have Tyreek Hill on a slate, I'm always going to be playing him. He's just that type of player. So at $8,600, despite being one of the more expensive players in the slate, I really like going to him. We've already talked about this Chiefs-Titans matchup. 2 offenses that let up a ton of yardage. 2 teams that do a lot of fantasy scoring as well. So Tyreek Hill, if there were ever opportunity for him to go out and score 50 fantasy points again, like he did earlier on this year, would be in this type of scenario. But at number 1, we have Davante Adams, and it's not really close in my opinion. He has by far the highest target share of any player in the NFL to this point. So even though he's the most expensive wide receiver, it can be argued that he should be priced higher. He should be in a tier of his own, in my opinion. He's just getting that many targets for this Packers team. So obviously, a very soft matchup against the Washington football team. This has been a top 5 defense to target against for wide receivers. So at a 23.8 point projection, we really don't have to overthink it here. If you end up having the salary to pay up for him, by all means, please go ahead and do so. And again, we have plenty of value options on this slate to go to. We'll have plenty to talk about tomorrow in my values video to help it fit up and pay up for even more of these stud options. And now, finally, for our tight ends to target. First off, we have Tyler Higbee at $4,500, who is somebody I also like on this Rams team as a stacking option with Stafford. You can see I have him projected for 15.9 points, and even though Higbee hasn't had a massive year to this point, he's still getting targeted plenty. He's still in an offense that's putting up a ton of fantasy production, so at some point we can expect that to regress. He's been a little bit of a touchdown machine to this point of his career, so a little bit dependent on that red zone upside, but I don't hate him as a GPP play. Again, in non-cash contests, we're willing to eat a little bit of that volatility to try and take advantage whenever it goes the right way. So I like him there as our first tight end to target. Next up, we have a guy who was just traded. I was kind of hoping he had played last week. He played Thursday Night Football for the Eagles, got traded Friday morning, and everyone on Twitter, including myself, was like, oh, can he play Sunday for the Cardinals? They really need him out there. But finally, had to wait that week out. There's rules against that in the NFL, particularly from the Players Association for obvious reasons. So at $3,900, he's able to make his first appearance for this Cardinals team. And obviously a high upside tight end, is athletic, is sure-handed, and now heading into one of the most productive offenses in the NFL. So over there in the wasteland that is the Philadelphia Eagles right now. I was a believer in Jalen Hurts before the year, but that faith is really dwindling at this point. So Ertz is going to see a huge upgrade in terms of offensive production. Also has a very good matchup against the Texans team. They have been the worst defense in the NFL against tight ends to this point, so you like to see that. So I have him projected for 14.7 points in his first performance. Obviously, we'll be starting for Max Williams, who went down with a pretty serious injury. So I definitely like it. Pretty much checks all the boxes I'm looking for, and somebody that can save you a little bit of salary this week. And number 4, we have Robert Tonyan at $3,500. So also somebody who's going to let you save some salary here. I like the matchup against the Washington football team, especially if you need to pay up for both Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones, or Aaron Rodgers and somebody like Davante Adams. They're expensive options. You're going to have to spend down at a few different positions, and personally for me, my favorite position to do so is probably tight end. It's one of the positions with the lower upside of any other position. I mean, you're dealing with probably a 20-25 point performance being the absolute ceiling that any of these guys are going to put up. Maybe the one exception being a Darren Waller, who is probably the only one who's going to go out there and get you 10 plus catches in any game. So for me, Robert Tonyan at that type of price tag gives me a lot of flexibility that I'm looking for, especially for some of these premium stacks. You can see I'm projected for 14.1 points and obviously has gotten off to a really rough start of the year. And honestly, you probably could have predicted that, right? Last year was extremely dependent on red zone production. Over half of his fantasy points came by scoring touchdowns, not by catches, not by just red zone production, just by scoring touchdowns, period. Just that 6-point bonus you get as a wide receiver. So Robert Tonyan, again, we should have seen this coming. You should have expected a little bit of regression, but is he regressed the whole point to being $3,500? I think that's a little bit too much. So a buyback spot for somebody who should see some positive regression at some point of the year. At number 3, we have Dallas Goedert, who is seeing even more production now that Zach Ertz is off of the team. Obviously, Zach Ertz traded to the Cardinals. So now Goedert's the one-man show for this Philly team. And we've seen a ton of targets go the tight end's way for Philly. Jalen Hurts just a little bit more familiar with the tight ends. Doesn't like to hold the ball a whole lot. When the pocket collapses, he's either looking to a tight end for a little dump-off pass or taking off running himself. So Goedert has already had a productive start to this year. The Raiders defense is a little bit of a tough defense to play. I mean, we've seen them have quite a good pass rush to this point, but if the pass rush is getting in there and causing problems for Hurts, that's just going to make even more targets open for Goedert. Goedert's, again, that short route specialist, somebody who's going to run a lot of those quick routes, not really those down-the-field play threats or anything like that. So wouldn't necessarily hurt him as much as some of the other players on this team, like a Devontae Smith or that kind of thing. So I am projected for 16.4 points right now, and it's definitely somebody I'll be rostering for Week 7. At number 2, we have Travis Kelce, and our last 2 targets here, I didn't have to tell you to play them. Essentially, anytime Travis Kelce and Darren Waller are on a slate, you're going to want to have them in lineups. They're just by and far the highest upside plays at this position. Obviously, Travis Kelce, a little bit more expensive than Waller this week, so that's why he finds himself at number 2, despite a very good matchup against this Titans team. And it's going to be a little bit tough to play Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Same thing if you're trying to play Mahomes and somebody like Tyreek Hill, but it's doable if you take a few of these cheaper options as well, like somebody like a Tonyan at the flex spot or something like that. So there are ways to make it happen. It's just a little bit more expensive than I'd like. But at number 1, it's Darren Waller, somebody who I just mentioned. He's only $6,700, so the price tag is a little bit easier to fit into your lineups. And this matchup against the Eagles is ideal. Again, they have Darius Slay. They have a few guys like Fletcher Cox on that defense that cause problems, but they also have a lot of their key pieces injured. They're banged up. They haven't been very effective at this point of the year. So Darren Waller, not going to have to worry about people like Darius Slay. It's going to be drawing much better matchups against some of those banged up linebackers and whatnot. So projected for 17.8 points right now, a little bit less than somebody like Travis Kelce, but that $900 difference in salary makes a huge difference for me. Really like him on this slate. Again, Darren Waller going to probably be my favorite tight end on any slate that he comes here just because of how many targets he gets, particularly in these point per reception type of formats. That's all I've got for my Week 7 core picks, guys. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments who you've got as your favorite team to stack this week. For me, obviously, there's a few options I'd consider going to. I mean, obviously the Chiefs, always going to be somebody I at least consider every single week. But for me this week, definitely going to be the Green Bay Packers. I really like Aaron Rodgers. I like all of those stud options on that team just because their offense is as concentrated as it is. So if you agree with me, go ahead and let me know down in the comments. But if not, let me know who you've got. I would love to get some debate going down in the comments and just see what you guys have for me. As always, guys, I really appreciate you guys coming by and watching the content. If you guys haven't already liked the video, if you have not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you guys go ahead and do so. That way you guys don't miss any of the content that I'm posting in the future. Obviously, we have main slate content here on the channel. We're going to have my value picks video coming out tomorrow, fades and sleepers, of course, our weekly live stream, but also content covering the PGA Tour, the UFC. We're going to have NBA content coming out in the future. All of that coming out for you. So make sure to stay tuned. Make sure to subscribe to not miss any of that. And again, thank you guys for stopping by. Good luck with all of your lineups for this week. And I'll see you guys on Sunday morning for the live stream.